Benefits from my perspective, I have done it a couple of times. I tend to write a test it out on the first time. The next semester I'll reuse that test or I'll modify it a little. The third time I just use the same test as I've used in the past. I tend not to write a test for the same class over and over again, or every time. This helped me early on when I was first crafting my exams for this class. I pretty much have them in place now. But early on, I would actually run the review session first, figure out which questions were really the hard ones that they're really struggling with, and then maybe not load it up. I had difficulty I've worked at 4 different universities. This is my 4th. Before I came here, I was actually teaching in a PhD program, and I never dealt with undergrads at that university. The other school I taught only with undergrads, and the other one only with undergrads. But I had an adjustment period when I first got here that I forgot how little undergrads knew, because I've been dealing with working people who were coming back and getting their PhDs and a little bit of master's work, but primarily I worked with PhD students. So for me to re-gauge what are difficult questions and appropriately design a test well for that audience, I found was very beneficial. So if I were to give you a pitch and I put up some of these points and I see Terry writing some things down, and I think if you are trying to write a grant or make a justification for why your department needs one of these systems, I hope some of these points are things you'll write into your system, along with what some other people have said. I think it enables you to appropriately target your audience for the level of difficulty that they can master, or they should be expected to master. That was really helpful to me. Or if I was too easy. With that advanced class, that was one of the problems I had, was then with them, I was shooting at junior level and I needed to ramp it up for senior level. And we were doing the review session, and they were getting them all right. And so then I went back in that next night and rewrote the test again, amended it a little, came back, and then they were like, whoa, that test was a lot harder than the review session. So I've had to work that out and learn how to make it appropriate levels in both. I have a chance to reteach or clarify. I do find that some elements, they didn't write it down right, or they just didn't get it, and I like that. I stop, and I brought this is the review that I'm going to be doing today in my class. I'm just going to talk about the logistics of it all. How do I handle this? Well, I'm running through all these PowerPoints. If you have 45 or 50 slides, I print them out on a slide of 6, and then I use a marker. And this one, I did use pink. You can see this is a pretty good example of how I try to master the logistics of it. I had a hard time when you're in class and you have 50 students looking at you and you're doing the clickers and you're monitoring and you're running the slides. And so I was having a hard time. You see it on the screen, you go, it's true. And you guys all answered true. And then you're like, no, it's not, it's false. So I had a hard time actually keeping the right answers. So I ended up marking mine. So in the squares, green means it's true, and the pink means it's false. And I highlight mine. This is my answer key then, essentially. Multiple choice, then I highlight across whichever bar and then put a number by it. So that helps me keep this straight. But you can also see in here, I know ahead of time some of these questions I intentionally pick because they're like something that'll be on the test. So for example, today they're going to be reviewing the selection process and interviewing. There's behavioral interviews, there's situational interviews. So I will put up a question on the screen about behavioral interviews, but on the exam it's really a situational interview question. And my point is I'll put it up there, they'll get it right or wrong, and then I'll stop and discuss and remind them. Don't forget, situational is what would you do, behavioral is what have you done in the past, and reinforce that again, and they'll take notes or whatnot. There's some other elements, so I'll pass this around, but you can see that I know ahead of time some of the math problems. In HR, every test, I always have math problems with selection. So, for example, here they're doing yield ratios and some numbers, so you can look at those questions. But I'll work out the math and actually stop, and we'll do it on the board together. And then usually I'll throw up a second one and not do it on the board, that they have to then know how to do it themselves. So for me, that's valuable, to give them the last shot on a day maybe they missed or they forgot. I mentioned before, reinforces a need for them to study. It really helps me justify to those students who are getting 60 and 70% in the class, who just are like, I just don't know, I think I'm studying a lot, and to say, you're not studying enough. You're not keeping up with your peer group. And it's not me, it's the effort that you're putting in, and it gives them an idea of how much more studying they need to do. It's competitive without even having the level of team divisions, and that's one of the reasons why I've I don't want to make it super competitive. I don't give prizes out. I don't keep track of who gets the most right. I certainly am thinking about it after yesterday and seeing how some of the other faculty are using this. That is something I want to implement for next year that I'll work on over the summer. But it's just kind of, how are you doing? And everybody has to assess themselves. But I do see them in small groups. They'll look and see what everybody, what their buddy's putting, and particularly the men. The women are not so much. And I get a 40-60 split, 40% men, and the men will really give each other a hard time. I'm really shocked sometimes when they'll be like, man, I hope you're not managing my company, and they're like, I can't believe you keep missing that. And somebody who maybe has not attended a lot, they'll poke that person a little, like, oh, it must have been a day you were gone again. And so they do kind of have their own little rivalries that they challenge each other. Go ahead.
I know that, too, it's still a safe, autonomous environment, and a lot of students still like that, and I think they like that competitiveness because they still really don't know who answered which way. I mean, the instructor always can, if they want to, can print out the reports and see, which clickers did what and what their activity is. But that being autonomous and having the safety of being able to reflect a little bit and then, say, okay, this is where I think I should be, is nice to pull your students in.
Next point, I think, is fairly obvious, the fun, and it's engaging for me. I think it's fun to do. It'll be a fun day today. I'll enjoy it. Class will go pretty fast. Better than coming in with a review sheet and saying, okay, what do you guys want to know about selection? And going through kind of the typical, what I experienced as a student review session. And I do think review sessions are important, so that's pedagogically important for me to always set aside a day for catch-up. If anything I didn't get a chance to finish up, like snow days this past couple of weeks, we got behind. And then the idea that I get a chance to give one more shot at what's really important for them to know versus what I tell them, go ahead and skip those pages. We just are not at that stage yet here. Drawbacks. Those first slides took me hours. For a 50 PowerPoint slide, I easily spent 12 man hours, easily, setting it up, every question, learning, making mistakes, and how to enter the data appropriately. Getting the slides right, getting them, one of the things I have a problem with in HR is a lot of times in my multiple choice answers, some of the responses are very long. They're 2 and 3 lines long. And you have one line that's one, line long, and you have number 2 is 2 lines long, number 3 is 3 lines long, but TurningPoint only gives you the same block of color, if that makes sense to everybody. It's evenly spaced. And my words aren't evenly spaced, so I end up with all these things where I've got to distort and make the lines fatter and wider and size-wise, and formatting for me the first couple of times was just a nightmare. And I was about ready to chuck it, except Lisa was like, no, you should use this. So I was like, okay, I'll persist. But that, I thought, it's incredibly cut back now, and now, as I said, once I have a core and I can use it, that 12 hours, I have used the same review session. I've taught this is my 4th semester. I teach 2 sections at a time, so I've taught it 8 times. I've used it 8 times. So at this point, it looks like it was a pretty good investment of time because every semester I pull it out and I, go through. And today is a little different than last semester because we didn't do one chapter because of a snow day. So I just had to go in and delete those 4 slides and move on. So the subsequent development, not a problem. The newest version of TurningPoint, much easier to use. The parsing now that they have. I haven't used it yet because I'm still using some of my old slides, but the next time I upgrade everything, I'll use the parser and go into the data test banks and just download a whole bunch of questions at once and have them put in. So I think that will get better. You can see I put up there, I can't cut and paste the answers as a group. I wish I could, but you have to go 1, 2, 3, each one at a time. That would be a feature I'd like them to change, but if they could. Setup cost of time in the classroom, the handing out. As I said, now that I have it in my own classroom, it's much more, happens much more quickly and is much easier to use. Much. Lisa can attest to the fact I would come up to her office and I'd have all my stuff to hand back to the students, my textbook, my lecture notes, then I'd put the laptop bag on my shoulder. We were using the old radio frequency ones, so then infrared, and the infrared, we couldn't figure out how to get the what do you call it, the receiver, so it would show, and so we found a microphone stand, and we would hook it to a microphone stand, actually, that was about this tall. So you can imagine, I would walk into class, and I'd be like, okay, I can't move because I got a laptop, I got a microphone stand, I got all my class materials, I got the bag of all the clickers, and then they would say, okay, well, you're teaching in this class, and now the next class period I would be in another room or another building. So I'd huck over to another building. So I was like, Lisa, I can't do this, I need my own set. So that has helped a lot. I just go in the classroom, I open up the closet, I pull out the poster board, set it out, we're done. So that to me, if you're going to do this and you can justify it to your department and get, like I did, I got 4 other faculty members to sign on the grant with me and say, we are going to use this. Put us in that classroom and we will use it.